everyone, Rian Chapman here from Freelancer-Client. Thanks for tuning in. Today I want to talk about shortlisting. I want to share with you my top 10 tips on creating freelancer shortlists. Shortlisting is a really important step in finding freelancers. With any project that you list, you are guaranteed to receive a lot of proposals. But only a small number of those freelancers are going to be suitable for your project. And you need a rapid way to identify which freelancers are going to provide the best potential for your project. So that's where shortlisting comes in. So today I'm using Upwork. I'll record more videos on how to do this on Freelancer and Gurus and other freelancing websites soon, but I'm going to focus on Upwork because I know that a number of you are using it. So a bit of background for you before I get into the tutorial. I listed a project last week. It's a website that I wanted developed, and I posted my job to Upwork. I'm going to go through the first step of finding the right freelancer for this job, which, as I mentioned in my introduction, is called shortlisting. So I'm going to share with you some of these tips that I have around how to rapidly get a list of shortlisted freelancers together using the features in Upwork. So first things first, if you're worried about continuity with your project, then you should think about hiring an agency. So a bit of background on that. Solo freelancers are freelancers who pretty much work for themselves. They're not part of an agency. So there are a lot of really great solo freelancers out there, and I've used them extensively with my projects, for example, with graphic design. And they're great if you have a short-term need, but if you have a very specific deliverable that you need to be delivering over a longer period of time, so for example, a few weeks, a few months, then you need to look at hiring an agency instead. The reason why I do this is if the solo freelancer gets sick or they get swamped with work, then you're going to be stuck as your project's going to stop, or it'll just come to a grinding halt, and it might be a temporary thing or it might be a permanent thing. It's something you don't want. So my suggestion is only look to hire freelancers that are part of an agency for your larger freelancer projects. Agencies tend to have larger workforces and can fill and supplement resources if there are any problems. So step one, when you're shortlisting, if your project is bigger, you need to look at hiring an agency. So the way that you find agencies on Upwork is pretty simple. So I've got all my proposals that have been sent to me here, and you look down on the right-hand side here and you can see, for example, hire agencies. So one of the proposals I've been looking at, which is this proposal here, is hire an agency. The one above it, for example, is actually hire a freelancer, which means that that person, Varun, is actually a solo operator. And I don't want to hire a solo operator or a solo freelancer. So I'm actually going to archive his proposal. Now, my second tip is technical experience. You need to look at the technical experience and skills of the freelancers and make sure that it's relevant to your needs for your project. So with my current project, I'm looking to develop a website, and the skills I'm looking for are as follows. Now, I won't make it too technical for you, but I'll give you a snippet of what I'm after. First thing is I'm after someone who's got PHP experience, which is a scripting language for web development. I like this language because it's actually easy maintained, and there are a lot of developers out there that can use this language. The second skill I'm looking for is JavaScript, which is a dynamic data script language that's used on the actual browser itself on my web page. The third skill I'm looking for is HTML, which is a browser language used to render content. The fourth skill is WordPress, which is a content management system, and I really like WordPress because it's so easy to use. The other skills I'm after is MySQL as well, which is a database language that's used for managing and retrieving data. So it's very extensible and it's used by a lot of web developers. Now what I'll do, for example, is I'll jump into this proposal here from Potenza and I'll have a look at the tags. So as you can see here, there are a number of tags that they've provided around the skill set. Now that's specifically applicable to this guy here, Nikhil, but it gives me a sense of what skills they've actually got. And there's a little flag here as well around basically that they've actually been validated. So I'll give you an example. So they've got skills here like WordPress, and if I scroll down here, I can actually see that they've actually been tested on that. And in this instance, he's got 4.35, which is a great skill. The other skills that I want to look for, apart from the technical skills I just spoke about, are English. I want to make sure that this freelancer can speak English. So as you can see here, they've been tested with English and they've actually proven to be above average, so 3.90, which is pretty good. So just to recap on this one, there are a range of skills that I'm looking for, PHP, WordPress, etc. So I check the tags here, and then I can also scroll down to see on Upwork if they've actually been tested for those as well and get a sense of how good they are at those skills. So As I mentioned earlier, WordPress has come up pretty well. There's been a HTML test for the top 30%, which is okay. I would have expected perhaps a little bit higher, but that's okay. And skills around readiness, so they've done obviously very well on their test around being a contractor on Upwork. They've got some other skills around MS SQL, which is not exactly what I'm after, but similar, so they've done pretty well on that. HTML, which is great as well, and the English, which I spoke about earlier. The other thing as well is that what I'll look for in the projects that they've actually done, they've actually had some experience of using those skills in the project. So if I go through all work history here, for example, I'll have a look through, and if I can find anything that lists out the skills that have been tested out specifically on this project, so there's a WordPress project, and on that WordPress project, they've done pretty well. So that gives me a good sense that they're pretty good with WordPress. A 4 here, so that's not so good, but a 5 here is excellent. If I have a look through any more, there might be some. Here we go, PHP. They've done a PHP project, 4.8, which is pretty good as well. Another freelancer I've been looking at on this, which I'll just go out of here, has been this guy here, so Abhishek. So let's have a look at Abhishek's skill set as well, and he's an agency. So if I look through his skill set, so really hasn't tested for a lot, so that's not really great. So if I go back up here, he's listed obviously a lot of skills. He doesn't have PHP, which I've asked for. He does have WordPress, which is good. XML, kind of okay, but I can't see anything about HTML. But when I look at his tests, he hasn't done a lot. And one of the red flags for me already is he's below average with his English basic skills test. So for me and for what I'm trying to achieve, probably not a great fit for the skills at least. Now my next tip is the portfolio. When I look through the portfolio of each freelancer, I want to see something that just captures my eye, that just gets me engaged. So normally what happens is with proposal, freelancers in this instance will provide a number of different sites that they've used. And I want to ensure that when I look through these sites that, again, it's a subjective thing, but I want to get a sense of that the freelancer has a good sense of design. This includes the ability to span different types of websites. So in short, I just don't want to hire someone that can only design one type of website. I'm also looking for a comprehensive portfolio. I don't want to just see 2 websites. I want to see a lot of websites that they've developed. So there's a good list here of websites. There's also some other websites I've listed here. And if I scroll down, I'll see some other examples of the portfolio on Upwork, which is great. So there's a range of websites they've done and different types of development that they've done. From my perspective, portfolio is really critical because what it is it's a test of the freelancer's ability to really market what they've done to me in a visual way. So picture tells 1,000 words, and in this instance with portfolios, you get a real sense quite up front of what type of work they've done and how visually creative and how attractive it's been. So let's just jump back into this proposal here and have a look at some of the examples that they've given me. So normally with Upwork, they have a bit of a security mechanism, which I actually will avoid that now, and I'll go and just copy this URL straight out and have a look at what they've done. So here's a website that they've actually built in the past, and this is in their portfolio, which we're going to have a look at right now. So May soon, looks okay. Yep, I like it. Great visual context, great visual design. Looks good. So that's one example. If I have a look at another one here, Gentleman's Box. We'll just go through the security mechanism here. Let's have a look at what they've done with this. Yep, really great design. I like it. It's just really visually attractive, a lot of contrast in it, a lot of great styling. Now, I'll caveat by saying I'm not a visual designer, but from a client perspective, this has given me a good sense already about the variety and the standard that they can operate at when it comes to designing websites. So I go back and I have a look at the other freelancer here, which is Abhishek here, and I have a look at what they've done. Okay, so there's a few examples here, which is pretty good. So let's have a look down at the portfolio as well. Yep, look, there's some portfolio work here. Looks pretty good. It's not too bad at all. Now let's have a look at some of the other links they've sent me as well. So if I check out this, and I'm just searching on this URL now. Okay, so that's the same website we just had a look at, so I'll look at another one. So let's go with this one, which is You Book Today. So let's have a look at You Book Today and see how that appears from a design perspective. Yeah, look, that's okay. It's not as perhaps as eye-catching as the other designs I saw from the previous freelancer, but it's okay. Like it's not too bad at all. So I'd give them a tick in terms of their portfolio. Tip number 4, understanding of my project. I like to read the proposal letters from freelancers. It actually gives me a good sense of whether they've understood what I want. So if I don't see a proposal letter, then I don't even bother reading proposal. Things I like to see included in the proposal letter include a reference back to my job. And in this example where I'm trying to develop a website, I also want to see a breakdown of the modules that the developer thinks that I want. So as you can see here from this proposal from Kana, seems like a nice guy. He's given me a really nice introduction there, and then he's given a breakdown of the modules that he thinks that I want developed with this website based on the proposal the job that I've listed on Upwork. So it's a good breakdown. So he's given me index page, the blog section, basically the ability to view comparison features, and also the back-end side of it as well. And then he's obviously given me his portfolio. But for me, what stands out with this letter and the reason why it's well written is he's actually given me a breakdown of the modules. What he's also done here, which is pretty good as well, is give me an understanding of what they provide as aftercare service. So, free project support, they have a dedicated manager, they give me a sense of how long it would take, the rate, etc., etc. Now, all this is caveated on me not having gone back to him and spoken about the project in more depth and given my requirements. So this is just an early snapshot of what Kana thinks I want to deliver with this project. And so it's a great introduction, and it's just a great way of getting me interested in having a conversation with him. Now, the next tip I've got is communication. So tip number 5, communication. It's a good segue from the previous point I spoke about, which was around the proposal and understanding my project. Communication skills are really important for me. So what I look for in the actual proposal is the wording and the tone of the proposal. If it's really well written in good English, then it's a good sign. So looking back through the same proposal I was just looking at before, which is from Kana, his English is pretty good. It's quite surprising actually, because when I look through his tests, he actually got 3.5 for his basic English test, which is below average. So maybe there's a very high standard on Upwork around English speakers. His spelling test is actually much better. So it's actually a surprise. So anyway, looking through his proposal letter, his English is actually pretty good. And I get a good sense of his flow of English and how he communicates and so on is pretty good. Now, there is probably a caveat with this, is that Kana could actually be using a template every time he writes a proposal. So he could just be basically having a template written and then just populating the specific information that I may need to actually have in the proposal. So that's something to be aware of. But if I go back to other freelancers, for example, if I scroll back up to where I was before and I have a look at, for example, Open Web Solutions, we seem to have a very good rating. Again, pretty good English, all kind of makes sense. There's nothing glaringly obvious around inability to speak English or communicate in it. And if I look back down, actually they're not validated in terms of their English skills. So again, something I look at. He's obviously rated himself as fluent with English, which is kind of apparent in the actual proposal. So it looks pretty good. So just recapping, communication is really important for me. Okay, so tip number 6, ratings. In my Freelancer-Client podcast, episode number 1, I spoke about the importance of feedback and ratings. So on Upwork, what I look for is a rating of 94% and above. Now that's a number that I've come up with, but it seems to work pretty well for me. I'm a tough taskmaster, so I need to set the bar quite high to ensure I'm being disciplined about the shortlisting process. Otherwise, I could end up shortlisting more than what I really need. I'll also scroll through the feedback to get a general vibe on the feedback as well, which gives me a good sense of how they've gone. So I'll just deep dive on that for a moment. So as I mentioned, 94% is a good threshold for me. And here we go. Just so happens that Potenza, who I was looking at before, has got 94%. So great. So let's deep dive a bit further on this freelancer here, and we'll scroll through and we'll get right down to this section here, the work history and feedback section, right down the bottom here. Okay, so it automatically shows you the relevant work. So it gives you the top 5, and it somehow has an algorithm to try and work out if these projects are the best fit in terms of comparison to your project. Not really. So I don't think Upwork's really got this right, but it's a good try. So what I look for here is I'll do a look through all the work history. And what I look for here is the comments that have sort of got 5 stars, but a lot of comments involved with them. So if I see something with 5 stars without much commentary, so one line here, kind of just doesn't really do it for me. It gives me a bit of a red flag to go, well, I need more information. This one's a good one. So it's given me 5 stars, which is a great rating. The client has also taken the time to actually write down some more commentary on exactly how it worked for them, which is great. So that's what I kind of look for, is more commentary, 5 stars. Equally, I also like to check out the negative feedback, and particularly the comments that are written. So if it's comments like they didn't get my requirements, then I tend to take a balanced view of that, because 9 times out of 10, it's also the client needs to provide relevant requirements for the project to work. So if they're not providing relevant requirements that are detailed enough, then of course the project's not going to succeed. So I tend to take a bit of a balanced approach with that one. But if I see things like unresponsive in the commentary, or they took too long to deliver, or the quality wasn't good, then I tend to pay closer attention and red flag that. So let's have a look through here. And this is something that caught my eye before. So not a great rating here. So 2.8 is pretty dismal. So the team are eager to please and get the jobs, but fail to deliver on time. So that's a bit of a red flag for me, because if they can't deliver on time, that's going to blow out my project timelines, and I don't want that. Now, they've spoken about deadlines that are clearly defined in the letter of offer, and they agreed to the terms, but they just didn't meet them. Now, look, on the balance of things, it's a 2.8 out of an ocean of 5. So I sort of look at that and go, yep, look, it's not great, but generally speaking, all the other feedback here is a 5 and a 4. Look, that's not great. A 4 is not so great, but 4.65 is satisfactory. A 5 is okay. Very short comments. So look, the feedback's a kind of mixed bunch, and I'd like to have seen more commentary, but it's nothing in there that's going to really alarm me too much at this point in time. So the 2.8 that I saw is probably a little bit of a concern. And what that would trigger me to think about is, if I do hire these freelancers, it would trigger me to be pretty robust around how I set expectations around the plan and communication. So I want to be kept informed as the project's progressing. I want to be kept informed on the timelines and the modules, and how progress is running along. And I want the communication to happen quite frequently. So I might set an interval of every 2 days I want an update, just to make sure that things are tracking on target. The other thing that I can do to balance or counterbalance this risk here is set up a module-based funding or a milestone-based funding plan, which means that I only pay as every milestone is delivered. Now, I spoke about that in my first podcast, so go check that out. One other thing that I really recommend when you're shortlisting is you look at and pay close attention to the larger size projects. So what I mean by that is projects with high prices and the feedback associated with them. From my experience, most freelancers, even the not so good ones, can deliver small projects relatively well. So that's an example of a small project there, $140. But when it comes to complex ones, which my website's going to be, and when it gets really tough, only the good and the really good freelancers will shine. So good feedback and ratings for larger size projects is a good sign. So some examples here. There's a $1,400 US project, and they've got 5 stars. 1 line of comment, which is okay. Another larger size project here, relatively speaking to the smaller size projects, they've got 5 stars as well. And that's a larger size project, and they've got some pretty good commentary there as well. And lastly, kind of related to feedback, is the number of hours that the freelancers worked. So if they've done a decent set of hours, then that's a really good thing. So if we come back to the actual profile for this freelancer, which is Potenza Global Solutions, so this is the agency rather than the actual individual I've been speaking to on this project, you can see that they've actually done 21,000 hours, which is a really big number of hours compared to the other freelancers you can see here. So that really stands out. And for me, doing a decent number of hours on a site like Upwork is a really good sign in terms of their ability to continually deliver projects and still have business coming through, and that they've stuck on Upwork for a long time, or its predecessor, which was Elance. So that's something else I look for. Tip number 7, how many projects is the freelancer currently working on? If your freelancer is a smaller agency and they've got a lot of projects they're currently working on, then that's a red flag for me. It means your project will be in a queue of work and may not get the attention that it needs. this could impact on the timelines and potentially the quality. So there's no golden rule with this one. It's dependent on the number of resources the agency has. But if it's a larger agency, you tend to take a lot more comfort from that. If it's a smaller agency, then it's something to be cautious on. So if I have a look through the proposals I've received, and we come back to my buddy Kana, let's have a look. So if I look at his proposal and I scroll right down to the bottom here and look at all work history, there's a little link here that tells me how many jobs are in progress. There's 32 jobs in progress. So for me, that's a lot of jobs, and I don't have a sense based on his proposal how many resources he's got. If I go back up here and perhaps have a look at the link for the company, for the agency, let's have a look. Let's see what the agency has. So they've got, based on this, 3 team members appearing on the site. So they could have more. So here we go, with our team of more than 200 employees. I'm a little bit cautious about this one because if they're saying they've got 3 team members, but they've got 200 employees, and they should be listing more out here in terms of their team members as well. I understand this says business managers, but it also gives me a greater sense of confidence if there's also some listings here of developers, testers, other people that are working with them. It just gives me a bit more confidence. So if I go back, and if I go back to view all proposals here, and I have a look at one of the other proposals I've been showcasing with you a fair amount today, which I'll just go down here and have a look at. And this is for Potenza. So let's have a look at Potenza and how many jobs they've got in flight. So we'll just go right down here and have a look at all work history, 5 jobs in progress. So that's pretty low for a big agency like that. So it could be a quiet time for them. It could be Christmas time and not many people are putting work through them. Or they might have some bigger projects that they're working on. Don't know. But 5 projects in progress is really good. I think I read somewhere here about the number of resources they've got earlier, but I think it was around about 180 resources. So, but if I go back to their profile here and have a look at the business, and let's see how many they've got. So they've got a lot more people listed here, which is a better indicator for me. So current members is 22, so that's pretty good. And they've got obviously a number of people here as well, which is good. So that's a good sign for me. I did read in one of their proposals earlier that they had 180 people thereabouts. So I'll take that on face value. So for me, this is a safer option in terms of current projects that are actually in progress. Tip number 8, post-implementation support. This is really relevant if you are developing an app, a website, or some software. So what I mean here is that there's a warranty that the freelancer provides after they deliver your project. It's an important one because with software and web design and app development, etc., if there's a bug that you don't find when you test what's been developed and it pops up later on, you want some insurance that it's going to get fixed free of charge. So you don't want a situation where 3 months down the track, or even 2 months, 1 month, whatever it is, a bug pops up that really is a fault in the way that your app or your website or your software is being developed. You don't want the freelancer to go, no, sorry, I have to charge you extra work for that one. So I really am pretty keen about ensuring that when I shortlist a freelancer, I've made sure that I've checked if they provide post-implementation support, and also get a sense of how long that implementation support lasts for. So if it's 2 months, 3 months, potentially even longer. So let's have a look at our 2 freelancers here. So Kana here, let's have a look through his proposal. He's indicated here to me assurances, free project support after project launch and post-project completion, which is great. The only thing I don't have a sense of is how long is that going to be for. So I'd like to find that out by asking Kana a question on that one. If I go to my other freelancer here that I'm looking at, which is Potenza, and we'll just display them here, let's have a look at what they provide. So they provide obviously free development server during production. Obviously, sorry, I mentioned before 180 resources, 139 is how many they've got. No mention of post-implementation support or what their policies are around that. So that's a bit of a red flag for me, because for me, it's a really important thing that I want to have some assurance on. So it won't rule them out, but it just means that I'd go back to them with a question to ask what their policy is on post-implementation support. Tip number 9, team size and composition. It's hard to validate this with freelancers as they can potentially exaggerate the number of resources and team members they've got available to them. to give the appearance that they're a larger agency, but I like to get a sense of the size of the agency and mix of resources that will be assigned to my project. So for example, web development project, which I'm running at the moment, I want to have some developers, I want to have a graphic designer and a tester, as well as a project manager or an engagement manager. So I've had a look through this proposal here from Potenza, and I want to just see what they would propose for me. Now, there's probably nothing I've seen in the proposal so far that gives me a really strong sense of who they're going to provide, and not specifically the individuals, because that's a bit meaningless for me, but just gives me a sense of they've thought through the composition of the team that will work on this project. They've made reference here to designers and developers and testers, which is a good start, because to me it indicates that the company is progressive in thinking about the resources they use for their projects, because clearly they don't outsource, I'm hoping, designers to someone else. They actually keep all that work in-house. So they've given some thought to it, but I haven't seen any reference here to who they put on the project in terms of composition of resources. And if I go back and have a look at my buddy here, Kana, let's have a look at what he's got to say. So he's talked a lot about obviously the portfolio, nothing about resources so far, apart from mentioning he's able to juggle multiple tasks, which is great. So for both freelancers, that's a question mark for me. And I'd want to go back and ask them about who they would propose to put on the project, and specifically get some sense of the pre-thought around composition of resources, because for me, a professional freelancer will actually be able to answer that question pretty quickly and tell you they put 2 developers on, they might put 1 graphic designer on, they also might put 2 testers or 1 tester on, and also importantly, an engagement point as well. And that's just proactive thinking from my perspective. Now, my last tip for shortlisting of freelancers is responsiveness. It's a baseline for me, and I want to find a freelancer who's demonstrating a good level of responsiveness, so I get a sense of they're interested, they're motivated, they're keen to do this job. So if I post a question to them, for example, I expect an answer back within an hour or 2, depending on the time zone. So looking at Potenza here, which is one of the freelancers I was engaging with earlier, I'm going to just bring up the message flow to give you a sense of their responsiveness here. So they provided an initial proposal to me yesterday actually, 8/28, and then I responded back saying, if you could complete an NDA, I can then share the requirements with you. They've responded back in 2 minutes to say, yes, no problems, thanks for the NDA, we'll get it back to you shortly. I've answered a few questions, and literally half hour later, they've come back to me with the NDA. I've then provided requirements, and they've kept me in the loop, which is great. And then they've gone through later in the evening to actually provide me with a proposal. For me, that's really good service. That's responsiveness. What I don't want is providing information or questions to a freelancer and not hearing from them for a day or 2. To me, that indicates a couple of things. It indicates either they're really busy, or they're not that interested in my work, or they're not very organized. So responsiveness is my last criteria for shortlisting. So that's it. My 10 tips for shortlisting freelancers on Upwork. I really hope this helps. There's plenty more of where that came from on Freelancer-Client. And to keep up to date with Freelancer-Client, please subscribe on this website and via the blog. You can reach me at Twitter, Facebook, or via the comments. Thanks again for tuning in.